Well, greetings, everyone. This is Terry McGonigal. I'm chair of the Convocation Committee, and we are thrilled to have you for a very special convocation. It's one of the favorites that we do every fall and every spring. And this is where we get to meet new residents who have recently moved to Monte Vista Groves or who are on the way to Monte Vista Groves. So we have two special guests this afternoon that we're going to hear from. And some of our longtime residents are going to interview them. Tom Erickson is going to interview Karen Kiser to start us off. And then Ron White will follow afterwards with Lloyd Evans. So we are thrilled to have you in the room, Karen. And you, Lloyd, welcome to Monte Vista Groves. We're glad to have you here. And we look forward to the conversation.
Karen, you once told me that you would never move to Monte Vista Grove. Yet here you are. What changed your mind? What changed your mind?
Well, remember, I was on the board for almost 8 years. And when you're on the board twice with two different executives, you get to know a lot of things about the Grove. And as a result of that, I didn't think I was old enough to live here. Well, unfortunately, I'm now over 85, and I'm beginning to wonder, I better get in before I hit 90, because then I will be no longer young, and I certainly will have to move in at that time. There's an Old Testament passage, and I think all of you know it, from Ecclesiastes, that tells you there's a time to be born, and then there's a time to die. I like to think I've got 10 more years, but maybe I don't. My parents were actually married in Monte Vista in 1932. They did weddings at that time, and so they were married here. Art French was another friend of mine that was here, and he's no longer with us. And I had a lot of friends that were here. So after I came off the board, I said to myself, well, maybe I better look at it in a different way. It was always going to be at some later time when I was old. So now that time's arrived. I'm old. And so it's time to, as the Ecclesiastes say, to pick up and do something different. It is not easy for me to come into a place like this because I don't like rules. I'm a rule breaker. I had several people that I work with told me that. I like to break rules. If the rule doesn't fit what I think is the value that I have, then I feel, I'm going to break a rule. I'm going to do something different. And so I pretty much did that in the ministry. I was breaking rules all the time. And I'm a cradle Presbyterian, which means that I actually believe theologically in the doctrine of the church. Can you believe that? But I do. I've tried to be Episcopalian, but I can't do it theologically. I just can't. And so now I'm here, and Tom's going to ask me all these questions he's probably always wanted to know, and I'll try to answer them the best I can, Tom.
Okay, now you just mentioned Art French. He was a very valued member of our community, and we certainly remember him with great respect. Who are some of the other people who have influenced you along the way?
I know a lot of people. Bill Craig goes way back. He's been trying to get me in here for a long time, and I kept telling him, I can't go there, Bill. I just can't. I told him that about 3 years ago. I didn't say I was too old, because I think Bill and I are close in age, but he's one that's been here. Gary Demarest, I know he's older than I am by at least 10 years, and he moved here. And then there have been a few different kinds of people that have moved here. Some women have come in here. Can you believe that? But no women were in here for many years. And there's various reasons, but now we have some women coming in. Some women, I'm talking about women clergy. And because I was one of the first in the synod, and it was pretty lonely for a long time. And now we have quite a few that are here.
Okay, you've mentioned women who are here now. What about your experience as a woman in ministry? What are some of the highs and the lows?
I've had unbelievable stories. Some of them are so outrageous you wouldn't want to hear them. But I had trouble with every committee that I had to relate to. My advocate, when I decided to go into the ministry in the middle of my 35th year of living, said he was for women clergy, but wouldn't I want to do something else? And he tried to talk me out of it. He would go to the committee and he would talk about me behind my back. He was my advocate. And he just didn't do it. And finally, I asked to get someone else. And the chair of the committee didn't believe in women clergy. The chair of the committee from the session of the church that I was attending, where my children had grown up, he wasn't for women clergy. The pastor of that church was definitely not for it at all. And so by the time I got ready to go under care, I had to get through the session. And so they circled a paper. In those days, you had a paper. And one of the questions was this person worthy to go into the ministry? And you either got it circled that you were worthy or you weren't worthy. Well, they got rid of that paper a long time ago, but not for me. I got a paper that said I was not worthy. And then, of course, 2 months went by, and the associate pastor, who was a friend of mine, he says, "Oh, we'll just let time take care of it, Karen. You have to get through this committee." And he says, "We'll just take our time." He was actually a facilitator for getting me through that committee. So after that, it was very interesting. Every hurdle that I had, the biggest obstacle were male clergy. I hate to have to say that, Tom, but in the 70s, you were not our friends. Now, that changed. I think culture helped it, but it also changed. And so what happened after that was I was called to a presbytery staff position. That was my first call down in Los Ranchos Presbytery. And I had to deal with the same thing. Every single power group wasn't at all sure that they wanted a woman in that position. But I always felt called by God, and I always felt I was worthy. And so I just kept on going. And I finally got a pastorate in Long Beach, and that was an experience. I was called as the youth pastor when I was 40 years old. You and I both know I'm not a youth pastor. I couldn't even be one. I'm the wrong sex. I didn't look right, and I was the wrong age. And so I tried to become youthful in my job. That's what I tried to do. Well, that was a difficult task, and I lasted there only about 3 years, and then I got a call to come and be the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church of El Monte, and I stayed there for 25 years. 25 years. I could hardly remember that, but it was a long time. I had many experiences working in the church. I have served faithfully in all the governing bodies. I value that. I have tremendous memories of that, of being the moderator of the Presbytery of San Gabriel and being the moderator of the Synod of Southern California. I made wonderful friends when I was the synod moderator that I wouldn't have met any other place but there, because it was a larger area. I guess you could say I was one of the trailblazers in Southern California. That's what we would be called, a trailblazer. I never felt that way. I told one colleague that actually I just did what I thought I had to do. I felt called to do it, and I just went ahead. And I always felt that God was with me, and I've been very blessed with all of the things that have happened. You probably need to ask me some new question because I've been talking too long.
Well, who are some of the people that you have been privileged to influence and to mentor?
I've had wonderful mentors.
No, I mean, who have you mentored?
I have mentored 8 seminarians who came individually to my church at different times. Mostly young men. I don't know why, but I seem to attract young men to come to my church. And I think I probably thought of them like my son, but I trained them all. And I felt pretty good about that because they went out into the church and served in the church, and I acted like their mentor and their teacher. And I felt that was really important, what I did. But I had wonderful teachers in seminary. I had Christian Reformed pastors, Lou Smeeds and James Dane, who used to teach at Fuller Seminary, and they were fabulous. First of all, because they were both preachers, and they both used to preach on Sunday night in a Christian Reformed church in Arcadia. Jim had a standing there, and he says, if you're going to be a parish pastor, you better be a preacher, because that's 50% of the job as far as he was concerned. And so I got mentored by them for what was important. He mentored me in preaching. I still use his structure to this day from homiletics. I still use James Dane's structure. And frankly, it's not boring. It's very much to the point, and he was a very good teacher. Lou was my theological mentor and ethics professor, and I spent a lot of personal time with him, and he died too young. They both died too young. In fact, they died younger than I am right now. I can't believe it. And they were very affirming of me, even though they were in a denomination, Christian Reformed church, that didn't believe in the ordination of women. I had professors that went beyond that. They went beyond that.
You were very fortunate to have those two men. Did you know my friend, my good friend, James Morgan,
exactly.
when you were there? Did you know him?
Yeah, I know him.
Good. Okay. Well, now, how do you hope to use your gifts when you come here to the Grove?
I'm coming here at the end of my life. And there were several things that made me change my mind too. My younger sister, died during the pandemic of COPD. She was never supposed to die before I was. I did her service. And then 6 months later, I lost a dear friend who had been my travel companion, an elder in the Presbyterian Church, and he died of dementia. And I had spent a couple of years kind of helping him deal with dementia. And then I suddenly thought about my own life, and I'm not going to live forever. And I realized that I was losing some skills that I decided are necessary for an independent woman to live in Granada Hills when she's 90 years old. After the pandemic, they took away the bus service up there. There was no bus service anymore. I would have had to be driving a car every single day, every place that I went. Well, my eyes took care of the whole thing. My eyes weren't good enough for me to be driving on freeways long distance. I couldn't drive at night. And suddenly, Debbie Herbert was right. It was the right time for me to come to Monte Vista. It was the right time. Now, I'm not convinced that I can live in a community. I have to learn how to do that. I have to learn. And Tom, you're going to help me, right?
You bet.
You're going to tell me where everything is.
So's Carol.
And what's to do, and your wife.
Yeah, you
This
bet.
wonderful couple, I'm going to give some praise to them. They just are a wonderful couple for anybody that's coming in here that's new. And I'm going to live near Tom, which is important. I got a very good cottage. That's very important to me because I'm coming from my own house and it's hard to give it up. Very hard to give it up.
How long have you lived in that house?
60 years I've lived in my house.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
And we're getting rid of everything right now. And that is very difficult. I had to get rid of a Baldwin grand piano. Really hard. I cried when they take it out the door, but it's gone down to my grandson in Arizona, so I don't feel too bad. But I'm counting on people like the Ericksons to help me get the ropes of living here. And I'm sure Tom is a very wise person, and so is Carol. I'm sure they're going to do a great job of helping me out. I also think, I don't know, there's a song that you've all heard that Barbara Streisand used to sing called People Who Need People. I think when you get older and some of the things that you used to do really well, you don't do well anymore, somebody else will help you. And I think it's really wonderful to be around a community where people are helping people. And I don't find that where I live right now. Everybody's left, everybody's moved out. And being a single woman, I'm living on a corner all by myself, worried about when I'm going to be robbed. And that's not a way that you want to live in your last 10 years of your life. So that's what I'm thinking about.
Thanks, Karen. Back to you, Terry.
Well, we'll go to our second new resident here at Monte Vista Groves, Lloyd Evans, and Ron White will conduct the conversation, and then we'll make sure we leave enough time to have some good dialogue with those of you that want to interact with these two dear new members of the resident community here at Monte Vista Grove. So I'm going to spin the computer around to the other side, and then Ron will take over in discussion with Lloyd. Is that, can you see Lloyd? See Lloyd. My gosh. Lost the whole thing. Okay.
Thank you, Terry. I'm delighted to introduce my friend, Lloyd Evans. Lloyd and I first met in September 1961 when we enrolled together at Princeton Theological Seminary. He from Occidental College and Hollywood Presbyterian Church, I from UCLA and the Glendale Presbyterian Church. Like every resident at Monte Vista Grove, each of us has so many different fascinating chapters. I think Lloyd has got about as many chapters as anyone in terms of his faith journey and his vocational journey. So Lloyd, let me ask you about some of your chapters. Yesterday afternoon, when you opened the door to C67, you were wearing a University of Wyoming cowboy shirt. Tell us about your childhood days in Wyoming.
Thanks, Ron. I hope my voice is carrying okay. I have a little problem with it. Yes, I was brought up in Wyoming. My dad was with the Board of National Missions of the Presbyterian Church as a mobile minister from 1930 to 1952. So I spent through the sophomore year of my high school in a small town, Grable, Wyoming, and had the influence of my father there, and the Wyoming West is a good background. High school class of 32. Then I moved to San Fernando and finished my last 2 years of high school there. It was a class of 332. So it's quite a change from the ruralness of Wyoming. But I've always loved Wyoming, still have many good friends there.
Lloyd, you grew up, you attended Hollywood Press in the heyday of Henrietta Mears and the college department. What is one memory that you have of that experience in the college department with Henrietta Mears?
I think the most interesting part about Henrietta Mears was a person of quality. No matter what we wanted to do, when or wherever, if it was done properly, done right, planned well, she would be for it. If it wasn't, no, the brakes were put on. For example, they wanted to have a Halloween party one year, and they were looking at it close to Halloween. She turned it down. Next year, we ended up having a party at the Paramount Studio Ranch with over 300 college kids there, but it was done with real quality, having Stuart Hamlin come and sing to us, and had a good evening that way. I always remember her studying the book of Joshua and the work that he did directed toward bringing the walls down, but also, as the Apostle Paul said too, this one thing I do, not these 10 things I dabble in. She always wanted to do things and do them right.
You and I went to Princeton Seminary in the kind of high day of the church. We had 150 people in our junior class. You were on the ground floor of Alexander Hall. I was on the third floor. What was one of the major influences that you can remember of your seminary education at Princeton?
Well, I think just the new people I learned and met while I was at Princeton was absolutely great. My room, my first year, was kind of a gathering place before dinner. I had a good stereo, so everybody used to come down and we'd dance to Chubby Chucker and the Twist, and then we'd all go to dinner. And new and different ideas would come up. Then too, those days, naturally dinner was formal. I'd wear a coat and tie. So us West Coasters came one night with our swimming suits on and a sport coat and a necktie.
In those days, Princeton Seminary had so many people from the West Coast, California, and the state of Washington, just all kinds of people. And we were different, those folks from the East Coast.
Right.
That was for sure. After graduation, you became a pastor on the Big Island of Hawaii. After Los Angeles and Princeton, that must have been quite a different experience. What was that like in your first call as a pastor?
It was interesting. always Pacific, enjoyed the Pacific, the ocean, and the Far East. A lot of my studies I did at Occidental were of the Far East. So in seminary, I got acquainted with Wally Fukunaga, who was from Honolulu, and the executive of the United Church over there would come and visit. And he says, certainly, I got plenty of good churches for you. So after seminary, I did move to Honolulu, became pastor of two churches, a Gloria Memorial, a Filipino church, and KL Congregational, a Japanese congregation. I merged the two together. We became the Pune United Church of Christ. And I enjoyed working with the people, and especially we had a large high school group. I enjoyed working with them, and encouraged me to go on more in teaching and preaching at that time. So I returned to Honolulu after 4 years and was in the graduate program, University of Hawaii, in political science, ended up as a professor, political science at Honolulu Community College, and spent the next 30 years working in community colleges.
Well, I was going to say that when I talk about the many chapters in your life, you've been a pastor, but you have spent these 30 years in two different community colleges, one in Colorado, one in Southern California. Talk a little bit about your experience in those two community colleges.
It was very interesting in the area of political science, especially. We saw an evolvement, a growth, and a change, not for the better, in our political process over that time. Newt Gingrich, his group out of Georgia, and others began the Tea Party and began more of a polarization of political thought. When I first started, all our senators normally would refer to each other as the honorable senator from whatever state it may be. We don't see much of this anymore. And there was quite a change. Colorado Springs was interesting in this regard too. Naturally, they were always busy fighting communism. And I had a class there that I taught, and articles began to appear in the newspaper that I was teaching communism in the schools. I had to rebut and say, yes, the class is called Modern Political Ideologies, and we do cover communism. So I had that. And then we were seeing a change there of economic conservatives, which most of Colorado Springs was, and the social conservatives, like Focus on the Family, that began to move into the city. So it was quite a change in that regard. So I think we really have an ongoing struggle in the political world of trying to restore our democratic principles at this point in time.
As we've become reacquainted, Lloyd, I've become so impressed with your interest in art, the numerous paintings that you have acquired, your books of Spanish authors of first editions signed by the authors. Say a little bit about how this interest in painting and art came into your life.
I've always enjoyed good novels, and I don't know if some way, somehow I got into Carlos Fuentes and his novels, began reading those, and then Gabriel Garcia Marquez and others. So kind of as a hobby or an additional thing, I've always liked Latin American novelists and have quite a few copies of books there. My cousin Kirk Nelson was born, raised in Los Angeles, and ended up as a doctor in Montana. But he loved the West, the lure of the West, and got into paintings and got me interested in them. So I ended up buying some Western art and then getting into California plein air painting. Another good friend of mine from Hollywood Press and Princeton, Bob Schwenk, majored in art at UCLA. And I got, as he was retiring, interested in art again. And he's quite a good, prolific plein air painter. So I've collected those. I'm not into high-end money or big money on it, but certainly enjoy a lot of the nice works that many of our painters have done in the West.
When Lloyd and I connected this summer, he called me from Italy, where unfortunately he was in a rural hospital, and the only person who could speak English was the doctor. The nurses could not. So I asked him why he was in Italy. I thought, well, he's just traveling in Italy. He was there for an Alfa Romeo reunion. So I said, well, Alfa Romeo? He said, yes, I've owned 18 Alfa Romeo cars. I said, you have? Tell us about that. 18 Alfa Romeo cars?
Right. It's a little different for Presbyterian minister, but when I was in seminary, I became good friends with Peter Marshall, the son of the famous Presbyterian minister. And he had an older Triumph, I had an older MG, and we wanted to get something new or different and drove around, finally going to Continental Motors in Plainfield, New Jersey, and driving this new white Italian sports car. We said, my gosh, it's neat. Top goes up and down real easy. The windows roll up and down, but it didn't have much power. So we talked to the sales manager. He says, I just got a new one in, and it's better engine and better transmission. And Peter and I both ended up in Alfa Romeos at that time. So I've had them since 1963. And a little different. On our trip to Italy, I ended up having an obstruction in my lower bowels, and I'm still working on trying to clear that up. And hopefully we'll be seeing a surgeon this next week and having a final operation of starting to feel better. But I've lost a lot of weight. Still driving an Alfa Romeo and thoroughly enjoying it.
So look for Lloyd's red Alfa Romeo, boy, it's terrific.
Yeah.
Well, let me finally ask you then the question on your decision to come to Monte Vista Grove. That's a big decision for all of us. How did you come to that decision?
I knew about the Grove from the 1960s. My former in-laws was Fred Winifred Wheels, and he moved in here 1968. And Winifred Wheels passed away in 2009, I believe it was. But coming here with all our kids, and it was mainly them and me and my wife having to sleep here, some on a bed, some on the floor, but became well acquainted with the Grove. And I knew sooner or later I'd be in a retirement home, and finally decided, yes, I'll come back to the Grove. And it began in April of this year, finally getting my unit October 1st.
Well, on Monday, Halloween was Lloyd's 87th birthday, and he threw a birthday party for Cynthia and me and Dean and Rebecca Thompson. He made New Mexico chili, and I can recommend his New Mexico chili.
Really?
It's terrific. So Lloyd, we're glad you're here. We want your health to improve. You're a very important part of our community.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Glad to meet many old friends from years gone by, and certainly look forward to the future and getting a little healthier too.
We have
Thank you.
about 20 minutes left. So why don't we open it up for questions or comments? And since the computer is sitting in front of Lloyd right now, let's begin with Lloyd for a few minutes, and then we'll rotate it back around to you, Karen. So any questions, comments, anything in the chat about our friend Lloyd?
You like to say?
Come on.
Bill Craig, or do you have something to say?
I think we're on now.
Yep.
Am I on video also yet?
Don't be on.
Polly says, don't be on video.
Just,
All
just say
right.
what you want to say.
Okay. Polly, you say to Lloyd what you want to say. You say it.
Well, we're glad you're here, Lloyd. And it reminds me of our Hollywood press days so long ago, but it's wonderful to have you here. And I just hope, your health improves after you have this coming surgery. And I just want you to know you'll sure be in Bill's and my prayers as you go through this. You're a wonderful guy and a wonderful addition to the campus.
And I want to add, Lloyd, you did such a very special thing not long ago. You mentioned Bob and Bernie Schwenk, longtime friends also. Would you just describe, for the benefit of the Grove folk here, what you did to get them here and what arrangement you made and so forth? I think it was an admirable thing, and we followed your pattern in getting another couple here and so forth. But just describe that, getting them to come over, and also what arrangements you made for them to be here.
Thanks, Bill and Polly. Bill and Polly have been good friends since back in the 1950s, 60s at Hollywood Press. So it's wonderful to be reunited with them. Bob and Bernie Schwenk live in Dana Point, California, retired pastor at San Juan Capistrano Church. And Bernie hasn't been doing quite as well, but coming along. And I wanted them to get up here and see some old friends. So we're able to set up the table outside Mark Place when the weather is great, and have Bob and Bernie here, you and Polly and Dale and Kathy Bruner, and certainly appreciate having Kathy and Dale here as well too. Dale was certainly an outstanding teacher for me and my growth at Hollywood Press, and a good friend, being both of us went Occidental, both of us majored in political science, and both of us love Morgan McKelvey, who is a professor of political science too. But to have lunch together with everybody was a great benefit. Certainly I enjoyed doing that. If you have any other minister friends, family, invite them over. We'll sit down with them and discuss things. Maybe they might end up as residents here also. Thank you, Bill and Polly.
Okay, Lloyd. And I think that was a wonderful thing you did. We had a wonderful time with them. Hadn't seen them for a long, long time. But you kind of gave us a model for inviting people here. And Dietary worked with us in such a special way to make that a great lunch and something we could really enjoy, and then give them a tour of the campus and everything else. Now, I've got something for a very feisty friend by the name of Karen Kiser. Who, Karen, it's about time, for Pete's sake.
You'll hold on 1 second. I'm going to rotate it around to Karen.
We also do have one more question in the chat for Lloyd. I assume you could respond in the chat for that. But the question is, would Lloyd tell us about his Welsh background at some point? We also have some other questions for Karen in the chat, so I can get to those at some other point.
I don't know where I'm supposed to be looking.
You're okay.
Yeah. I guess they don't have any questions.
Oh, well, Karen, if I'm still on with you, I'm just delighted. We are delighted that you're here. You did tell us that you would never come here. And so this was fantastic. Just a real quick, something I think you would appreciate when, not hearing me now.
Bill, you're going to have to speak louder. We're having trouble on the audio side.
What do you need to unplug? You can't hear. They can't hear you.
Who are you talking to?
Say, can you hear me?
Am I still on, or you're?
Yes, Bill, you're still on, but your volume is turned way down. You have to speak real loud in order for Karen to hear you.
All right.
You better preach.
Oh, dear. I just wanted to say, when I was pastor of the church in Sherman Oaks in the 70s, a lady elder in the church said, and this was the beginning of Women's Lib, and she said, Jesus Christ liberated me 2,000 years ago. And you're the personification of that. Let me let you go. There are other questions and so forth. Thank you so much. Just grateful that you're here.
Karen, Bill's comment was about a colleague, a female pastor in the 1970s who made the comment that Jesus Christ liberated her 2,000 years ago.
That wasn't me, tell him.
No.
Oh, I know.
We also have a question in the chat for Karen that says, what activities are you looking forward to being involved in when you move on campus?
What activities are you looking forward to when you move on campus?
I'm looking to spend a lot of time in the wellness center. When you live alone, like I have, and you're in charge of the entire house and all the yard, and even though you have a gardener, they don't do what you want, you don't have a lot of time to go to a wellness center. And I haven't gone to a wellness center for maybe 5 years. And then the pandemic came and I couldn't do a thing. So I have makeup time that I'm going to put in for a bunch of classes up there. And I'm really looking forward to doing that. It was one of the reasons that I decided I probably need to be in assisted living place because of the facility and the things that are offered here.
We're glad you're here, Karen.
And is that somebody that goes to the wellness center?
No. Other questions or comments?
I have a question for Karen. It's Catherine Hughes, Karen. I'd like to know the year that you were ordained.
Catherine would like to know, Catherine's speaking right here.
Okay.
And she would like to know, what year were you ordained?
What year?
What year were you ordained?
1977. It's a long time ago, Catherine.
Yes. We're about the same age, so I do remember that time.
Yeah, and Catherine just a few weeks ago gave an incredible presentation in an evening that we call Musings about her own journey towards being called into the ministry.
She probably dealt with a lot of things that I've had to deal with.
Yes, and Catherine, your tenacity was inspiring to all of us that listened that night. So thank you for that. Marilee, you need to unmute. Marilee, go ahead and unmute.
I think I'm unmuted. I
Okay,
just
you're
want
off
to say
mute now.
something
Yeah, we
to
can hear
Karen.
you.
Karen, you know, you and I, although you lived in San Fernando Valley, but you were working in a different presbytery than I was. So I wouldn't even know you, except that you used to show up to every conference that, and especially the peace and justice type conferences. So that's how I know you. And I'm glad you're with us.
Marilee was commenting that you used to show up at so many events, at so many presbyteries, particularly related to peace and justice issues. And Marilee is one of the key anchors in terms of those commitments here at Monte Vista Grove. So she's appreciative of your presence at all those events.
Thank you, Marilee. I've known you for a long time,
Very
long time.
Well, this has been a delightful session as we've gotten to know our new neighbors and friends a little bit better. So Karen and Lloyd, thank you for sharing your pilgrimage of life with us and taking the next step to be part of this community. And we look forward to deepening friendship with both of you over time. So let me just, as we close, just remind you of next week's session. Susan Schwartz will be our speaker, and Susan has been the director of the Pasadena Education Network for 27 years. She's involved in supporting teachers and families throughout the Pasadena School District. So since we are resident right here in Pasadena, we're going to stay local next week, and we're going to hear more about what's going on in Pasadena School District with Susan Schwartz. So we look forward to that conversation next week. Let me close this in a word of prayer as we welcome Lloyd and Karen into our community. Lord, the family of your saints is so broad and so wide, and yet somehow we are connected to each other through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And so we are grateful that in your providence, these two faithful servants, Karen and Lloyd, have been led to come to be a part of our community. We are confident that the gifts that they've used so faithfully to serve your people in the world will be brought here, and that we will be beneficiaries of their presence, of their life, of their faith, of their courage, and of their faithfulness. So we welcome Karen, welcome Lloyd. We pray your grace upon them. And Lord, help us to be open to how you want to lead and speak to each of us here as we reside at Monte Vista Groves through these two new residents in this community. We're grateful for your grace in Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you, folks, for being here this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you next Thursday at 4:00 for our convocation with Susan Schwartz. Peace of Christ to all of you.